Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Hi, really lovely to be here. I'm Nadine and I'm founder of Hopstair.
Well, Nadine, I appreciate your joining us today. I would love it if you could start us off by telling us about how you got into the work you do and what drives your passion for it.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually get asked that question quite a bit, which is not too surprising, but people always like, oh, Nadine, you sound so much like a coach. Like, do you want to change the world? And I always say, yes, I do. No, but the basic premise of my work centers around the concept of confidence. And it's a concept that's quite widely misunderstood, quite underexplored. If you ask people about confidence, they tend to usually have a dictionary definition as to what that is, and let alone like a deeper understanding as to why it's important. How would you go about building it? So usually we stay as a society at the periphery, thinking it's all about presentation skills, networking, or things like that, when it's much, much, much deeper. That's probably not even 1% of what confidence is all about. So for me, it was a hindsight kind of scenario where in my late 20s, I realized as I had built my confidence by accident, looking back, I realized I had no confidence. Needless to say, that's why I built it. And for me, that building of my confidence was such a transformational change for my life, which it's really 180 degrees to the point where I looked back and I couldn't believe that I was living life so different, like not differently in terms of necessarily the daily tasks, but how I approached it, my mindset, my attitude, my well-being, all of those sorts of things that ultimately bring you happiness and joy or take that away from you. And so, and that, but it didn't stop there. That was the igniting point, and that was maybe 6-7 years ago now. And I then just went on a personal quest. I started a blog around that time. I just talked to lots of people around that topic. And fast forward a few years later, I would then really get serious about it in the sense that I would found Hopstair, and really with the mission to educate and raise awareness about the topic. That's such a key gap in our mental health services landscape, that when we talk about mental health, what we consider to be important for our mental health, but also to build a solution that actually helps people build their confidence. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
So to help my comprehension, how did you come up with the name Hopstair?
Well, so one investor in the past has told me, or I don't know if it was an investor actually, but one person in the past told me, Nadine, you need a sexier explanation as to why you chose Hopstair, but you get the non-sexy version right now.
All right.
Which effectively is, we started out with being called Little Nudge. Sounds quite nice, doesn't it? But apparently the word nudge is overused and over trademarked. And so we got into the typical things that you would expect, but effectively I wanted to file a second trademark on the name, and that raised some concerns from other companies that only had trademark Nudge, not Little Nudge, but Nudge. And so long story short, we didn't really have a choice but to rebrand. And so we went again through the hundreds of names that were possible, and effectively we shortlisted to those that, obviously the names that we had come up with all were centered around confidence, either with the word or something equivalent. Hopstair got into the mix because obviously it's very mobile. It's it's about climbing a stair. It's very getting closer to your goal type sort of connotation. And I quite like personally that kind of piecing together. It's a bit like Facebook, which meant nothing at the time when it was created, but now obviously it's like a brand name. You don't really think about Facebook. It's not a normal word, but it's pieced together by two other words. And so the same principle is how we created Hopstair, and it just ended up in the shortlist being the name that no one hated. Very important. Actually, a lot of people said they like it much better than Little Nudge, but again, I'm sure opinions vary. But also importantly, you do need to consider the social handles, the trademarks, the domain names.
And so we're hopping up a stair. We're
Yes.
taking a step in a direction towards a certain goal. And the goal in this case is improve self-confidence or building self-confidence if we're starting really low, right?
Correct.
So what are the foundations of what you've discovered were needed for you to build confidence where there was none?
Yeah, so I think so for me it was quite like I said earlier. I mentioned that for me I built it by accident, and what I mean with that is that I've always been forever curious. So I was lucky to have a certified coach as a colleague in a few jobs ago. And I just wanted to understand what coaching was. I started actually with mentoring. Also had no idea what mentoring was, but then wanted to explore coaching. And the exam question I'd posed to my colleague / coach was, I'm stuck in my career. I want my next promotion. That was the premise of the coaching sessions. So she effectively worked with me over 6 sessions. And I'd say within 12 months of that first session, I had built my confidence to a really strong degree. The word confidence didn't come up. We actually didn't even talk much about a promotion. It was really all about challenging how I talk about myself, how I view myself, how I understand and appreciate myself. So it was a lot of feedback, playback of sort of my mental narrative about myself. So that was a key change for me, where for me the starting point to my confidence building journey was really to shift that from a glass half empty to a glass half full. It sounds very esoteric, but it's true. But also the whole I can't to this is what I can do, or this is what I can't do yet.
So is it possible for you to give us a bit of or an overview of what was your view of yourself? What were the kinds of internal thoughts you had before that coaching that helped you transform it? How did you think of yourself?
So I had a whole lot of issues. Maybe I'll start at that point. So I would experience a lot of the classic, what we could consider mental health symptoms. Like I inherited depression from my mom, for example. I also inherited her low confidence. I suffered from a lot of anxiety, stress. I worried a lot about a lot of things. At all times, I worried what other people had to say about me. I pre-worried about things that I think could somehow
Might
somehow
go
could
wrong,
have done
yeah.
wrong. Yeah. Just that kind of obsessiveness about, have I done something wrong? Why did I do it wrong? Oh my God, like any piece of even just consider like minor like constructive criticism would be blown out of proportion in my mind. And then, you know, in the work context of I was in quite a few roles where there was a lot of what we call 360 feedback. So you'd get feedback from around the place, and there might be the odd person that might, you know, you may have had a bad moment and you sort of maybe didn't act right in a particular situation. I don't mean anything outrageous, but it could just be that you made a comment that you weren't quite aware of. And again, that feedback would come back and I would blow it out of proportion. It would be made into a catastrophe. Oh my God, I'm worthless. I'm the worst human being on the planet. How could I have done this? Like, what on earth? And that would make to the point where I get such big anxiety that it would have physical symptoms, heart palpitations, unable to sleep, and so on and so forth. So it was a very destructive, very negative, very, obsessive kind of way to approach the world and to interact with stimuli around me. Either the ones clearly directed at me, or just imagining that everything had to be about something negative to do with me. You know what I mean?
So when you looked back a year later and realized it had been changed and you started to figure out, how did that change? What did you learn about what it was necessary for you to change your confidence?
So I think, like I say, I think a first key aspect was that when it came, for example, to my performance, a lot of feedback would be about the things you have to improve. And that's natural. That's a very human primal tendency to over focus on the negative instead of the positive, and also over emphasize Like, for example, you might get negative feedback, but it might be on something that will never be your strength. It will never be something that you will ever be good at, but maybe your employment context wants to put you in that box. You have to, like, let's say you are somebody who's very creative, but you're suddenly supposed to do a lot of Excel spreadsheets. I'm just making a random example up. That might just never be something you will excel at. It's just not in your natural gift. And so what a confident person would do is be like, oh, well, I will do my best here, but I'm just going to be upfront that there will be a limit to what I can deliver here. And maybe we pull in somebody whose strong point this is. But a non-confident person will try and work this through. I need to work with these Excel spreadsheets somehow. And if I can't, you set yourself up for failure.
Right.
And so that was sort of the shift for me. I suddenly could identify, okay, you're approaching me with like this feedback. I could put feedback in boxes. Okay, this feedback, this can help me really get better in terms of my strengths, my passions, where I want to be, and what's within my gift to change. And this is feedback that's just not, I just cannot do anything about. And I would disassociate. I would no longer take it so personal, because it's not, So I think it's that kind of shift. That's just a tangible example, but I could extend it to other things. Similarly, with the example I brought, maybe you have said the wrong things in a conversation with someone, and instead of obsessing about it, you're like, okay, wait a minute, what happened there? I clearly acted too fast. I didn't give myself time to think, to consider the context, and to do this quietly and not quietly, but slowly and deliberately. So put that in a box. Okay, lesson learned. Going forward, I'm going to do it this way.
Excellent.
And there's peace in your mind. There's no obsession anymore.
So how did you make that shift, since you clearly were stuck on beating yourself up and obsessing about things you couldn't control? What were the keys that you found to help you make that shift?
I think it is that kind of mental shift towards strengths and positives within yourself that will help you also prime yourself towards the strengths and positives around you, and will have more of a action solution, constructive, will give you a more constructive lens than if you already have a negative image of yourself. You view yourself as someone who's faulty, who's flawed, who can't, like who isn't, all these negatives. Then that's how you will experience your environment. And I think what this coaching, this suite of coaching helped me do is see what I bring to the table, what I can do, what I am capable of. And those are the things that I could see. Like, I primed myself to looking at those things and seeing, identifying opportunities, how I can be even better and build on those rather than, So I think it's that kind of mental shift is a key part of it. But also even just understanding, the first step is to even just understand what those strengths are and to really take the time to take those in. So as an example, we did a Myers-Briggs, which opinions divide, like whether it's, scientifically valid or not too, but obviously it's helped a lot of people. And I remember she has gone through with me and sort of said, like these are the characteristics, the strengths typically associated with your profile. And she was like, how did that feel? And I was like, oh, this is so boring. And this and that. All sorts of negative things came to mind when these characteristics popped up, like diligent, thorough, and she was like, why? These are characteristics that any employer would love to have. And so it's that kind of stuff that she helped me see, like those subconscious thought patterns as to how I viewed and processed my environment in terms of how it relates to me and how I see myself. Like, effectively, how you deal with your environment is a reflection of what you think about yourself, right? It's a mirror, and holding up that mirror and showing that to me was just so eye-opening. So gradually I was able to shift. Obviously, it's a longer term process, but gradually you shift that perception to a positive and strength-based one.
That's a critical thing, right? And I can see how that could help you if you identify, with the help of your coach, that your particular filter looking at yourself is skewed to the negative. If you're willing to see the other side of it, then you can make a lot of progress. What else do you do with the Hopstair program that helps people either identify places where they're skewing negative on their own view of themselves, or build different strengths or tolerance for their weaknesses?
Yeah, so I'll use a couple of visual analogies. So on the one hand, think about it as an onion. So one thing that's really difficult about confidence, maybe as a bit of context, the difficult thing about confidence is that it's very tightly related to self-awareness. So effectively, the more you know about yourself, step one, and then the more you appreciate those traits you've discovered, the more confident you will become. It's not the only thing that builds confidence, but it's a key part. If you really don't understand yourself, you can't be fully confident, but because you will be unaware of what drives you, your values, your like unhealthy habits you might have, all sorts of things. So you really need to take that time, go on that journey to understand yourself. So how do you understand yourself? And bringing the onion as a visual analogy, most people will stop at that outer layer. So say, for example, I don't like Greek food. It makes I don't like it. I don't like to go in these social settings because I don't like people. But that's usually where the where the
That's the outside, right?
yeah, like it's the outside. And but I always tend to say is you need to ask at least 10 whys, probably 20, ideally 50,
All right,
because
all right.
only that's
Let me slow you down, because you speak very rapidly. But what you're saying, I think what I heard you say is you want somebody to ask 10, 20, or maybe even ideally 50 times, ask themselves, why don't I like Greek food, or why don't I want to go in this? So I'm going to dig deeper into the reasons I hold for why I do what I do. Is that correct?
yes, that's right. Yeah. I always say knowledge is power. And that holds true for your mental health as well, and certainly for your confidence. So the more you understand yourself, the more you understand what sorts of things might get triggered if you are in a social context. Let's use this as an example. Let's say, for example, you might hate to go into a social setting. Could be various reasons. Maybe you feel self-conscious about how you look. You might sort of feel self-conscious about another part of you. Maybe you've had a very difficult situation in the past that stuck with you. Maybe someone laughed openly, bullied you in the past in a social context, and it just makes you scared that that will happen again. Maybe someone outrightly told you, you suck at social interactions, or you can't make friends, you're not a good friend. It could be all sorts of things, narratives that you may or may not have processed that happened to you at one point and that stuck with you and now give you the reason as to why you feel so afraid to go into a social setting. But if you don't understand that, all you know is you don't like social settings.
Exactly.
So ultimately the point of like what a key part of confidence building is to strip like or to go deeper, you
To
know,
understand
and
yourself at deeper and deeper levels.
exactly. And obviously, there's limitations to how far you can go with that level of introspection within an app format, which Hopstair is. But it will give you a starting point. Like no solution on the planet, no solution in the mental health space will be able to do everything. But what we are able to do is help you get into the swing of things to do that introspection as one aspect of confidence building. I always say, you know, that Johari's window. There's things about yourself that you know and that other people know about yourself. Well done. But then as humans, we tend to get really scared about the things we don't know. We don't like unpredictability. We don't like uncertainty. We don't like to be surprised. But that's key in order for us to build our confidence. So we have to ask people, hey, what do you think my strengths lie? Where do you think my weaknesses lie? Those are things you may not know. If you're very confident, there's a good chance you won't be surprised anymore as to what comes back because you'll know the good, the bad, and the ugly. But then the trick is to also try and put yourself into situations where you discover the things you didn't know, and that's a big loop back to the hindsight moment I had back in the day because I had no clue that I had no confidence. I didn't
Right.
know. I didn't have. And how do you discover that blind spot that you don't know and other people don't know about you? It's by putting yourself into different situations that will reveal an aspect of yourself you haven't discovered yet. Or
And
in my
being
case,
willing and being
yeah,
willing to ask the why questions.
yeah. And being
about what happens
exactly.
when you go in there, right?
Correct. And obviously a coach is a beautiful, like not everyone can necessarily afford a one-to-one session. Obviously would highly recommend. It's a beautiful thing. But the point of a coach that I always say is like the process of coaching is you'll get asked a lot of questions, a lot of probing questions as well. And it's very much about unlocking things you already have somewhere in your head, but you didn't compute, you didn't put them together yet. It is those whys, it is peeling back that onion. And yeah, this like illuminating that, increasing that window of the things you know about yourself, and that builds confidence because suddenly you have the clue, the root cause as to what's driving some of your unhealthy habits. And the social interactions may just be like actually a small thing. Some people suffer from addiction, some people suffer from things that are really harmful, in more immediate ways to themselves, and to really understand what's causing them, what's fueling that it takes time. And we all have these things. There's no shame in going down that rabbit hole. It's not always pretty. Like, we don't like revealing the dark sides of ourselves, but they're there. And the only way to really get to the good side for good is to go on that journey.
Excellent. So one of the primary steps is learning more about yourself at deeper and deeper levels with honesty.
Yeah.
What's next? What else does the Hopstair app or program do for a person?
So the other thing I mentioned as well was like that kind of, we generally tend to call it comfort zone, but I think that has like it can sometimes have a negative connotation. But what we try and do is give people tiny exercises or just activities. Let's call them activities. It could be something quite basic. Take a different route to work. Say hello to a stranger, something you wouldn't normally do. And to a degree, that could be pushing the comfort zone. To a degree, it's simply vary your routine. So that's the whole brain aspect of the brain taking up so much energy proportionate to its size in the body as an organ, that a lot of processes get automated. So we need to really challenge ourselves. Like, the automation is good. We don't have to think about breathing. That's good. One thing off our plate every day. But a lot of other things get automated as well, and we don't think about them anymore. And then we're on autopilot. So we do need to consciously stop ourselves, or like artificially engineer, like make tiny changes to that routine that we're so used to.
And get prompted, right? Get prompted to make that observation.
Correct. And to just observe it, and then obviously be mindful. Like, but we've all had that, like that's why there's so much resistance within humans to change, because it takes us outside of that comfort of, we know that the swing of things, we know the 10 steps we need to do, or the 50 things, or like, we got to go up, this is breakfast, and we drop the kids to school. We know the routine. Like, it's in our head. And as soon as we vary it, we get stressed. Oh no, now I have to think about what I need to do, because I'm not used to it. And obviously there is a balance to be struck. We need that routine because of the brain has we have limited energy within our body. So we need to use it wisely. But infusing your life, your everyday, with a little bit of things that are different, really help you to make more conscious, have a more conscious, perception experience of that day, which will illuminate a side of you didn't quite understand or know yet in that sense. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I'm sure you put it more eloquently.
Well, and what it sounds like is that you're helping people build a confidence because they keep stretching a little bit and having a success. And if they stretch a little bit and they don't have a success, then you help them with the questions of why, and they can discover, okay, this was hitting one of my weak spots, and so I can adjust. And the next kind of steps I take that will be outside my comfort zone might be a little bit more toward my stronger strengths.
Correct. And I think what I would also always say is, like I mentioned in passing earlier, a lot of people get scared, like not scared, but almost ashamed. How could I not know about this before? Like, why didn't I know about this thing? It's almost like it's a shameful thing to discover something new about yourself. I would flip the script, because this is beautiful. Like, congratulations. Here's your trophy. This is great. This will help you tremendously. But I think as a society, we always, there's this pressure to be perfect, to get it right first time. There's this kind of, it's frowned upon to get it wrong. But actually that's obviously, I know these classic sayings that are like overused, but like, we have to fail to succeed, blah, 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 blah. But ultimately, that's the same truth for us. If always we can always take the examples of babies. The only reason they learn so fast, they learn a whole language in a couple of years, is because they just do, and they get it wrong 1,000,001 time, probably more than that, but they keep doing it. And it's the same with our exploration of ourselves. Is we just need to keep going. We're not going to get it right. We'll wake up one morning and be like, oh my God, had I known this 5 years ago, life would have been different. And that's okay. It's okay. You have not lost valuable lifetime here. You still have gained a lot of experience through that process. So all I was trying to emphasize here is you mentioned the word achievement. And achievement, we tend to reduce to, I got a promotion. I got a new life partner, or like something that quote unquote is tangible. But actually achievements are also just to learn about yourself. So one of our strap lines for Hopstair is to invest daily in your mental health piggy bank. And what's a piggy bank? You make daily deposits. Obviously that's sort of in a monetary sense, but it's the same for us. Like, it's not about uncovering everything about you in one day, but it's peeling back that onion just a little bit every day. It doesn't have to be the whole onion, because that's just way too much.
Excellent. And so asking a whole series of questions about why I like this or I don't like that, learning more about myself, and then breaking out of kind of the mindless pattern of routine. So I'm stretching and I'm having different experiences and I'm watching my response to it. Yeah. Is there more that's in the app? Are you taking them to another level after that?
I think the two other things that are really important for confidence building is actually quite interesting and maybe not as obvious from the get-go. But one sounds super simple, but one is simply to understand more what confidence actually is. I kid you not, the number of times I've worked with people, say student projects or individual student work, just people I've worked with or I've spoken more about. Could be a 15-minute chat, could be a 6-week project. It doesn't really matter, but just people diving deeper into what is actually confidence, and actually helps them be more confident, because suddenly they actually are more mindful of certain things in their lives because of the complexity of confidence. They might suddenly be more aware that they have difficulty setting boundaries with people that are bad for them or trying to take advantage of them. They might suddenly be aware that they're trying to please people and and compromising their own well-being for that. And even just that awareness will trigger even just microscopic actions or reflections or further thought. But it's only possible by having a greater idea as to, like, imagine, I always say, if we imagine you see a house, maybe it's a terrible analogy, but I'll just try it. Imagine you only have a house, and that's all you know about houses. You know the shape. But imagine somebody, you talk for an hour with the builder and they just explain to you a little bit more about the construction and what's required to make it a solid building. That will probably help you into managing your own home, or in the place you live a bit better, because you know what's required, for a house to stand. Maybe a terrible analogy, but the point is, the point is, the more you understand the depth of something, or of something, the more you are actually able to connect different things to it, if that makes sense, and sort of trigger that learning process. I don't know if that's
yes, it makes very good sense. And so how do you help people understand at deeper levels what confidence is?
So a few things. So on the one hand, obviously we do a lot of outside the app, like kind of free resources, whether that's me doing group sessions on a topic, whether it's obviously our social media, which is really there to kind of just provide informative, helpful, but also just inspirational, boosty type of content. And so many people would come to me like, I had never thought about confidence that way. And that's very much also the premise of the book I'm writing on the subject, to make confidence relatable because of how vague it can be for people to conceptualize as a word, as a thing. But in the app itself, there's also going to be a lot of content that's just going to explain, oh, by the way, did you know? Here's a snippet of content. And I think it's obviously all bite-sized because we're talking about an app. And as soon as it's too long, we're not delivering a novel size reading materials, because no one's going to engage with that on a mobile platform. So obviously it's all bite-sized, it's concise, it's snappy, but it's that kind of variety of, here's a fact about confidence you may have not known about. Here's, for example, something about statistics, how widespread it is, how it's built, what are the constituent parts of confidence, things like that. But then other content we already discussed is things like the just, general science as to what actually goes on in the mind when it comes to confidence building, like what, again, the more you understand the concept and yourself better, the greater your confidence. And then the kind of exercise part, the introspection part, all these sorts of things come together in the kinds of content that we then also within the app bring to the user.
And then you mentioned that, and there's one more aspect of the app. What's that?
Yeah. So one key aspect that will be live soon, so bear with me, but one key aspect that's really important, but you can do it yourself, but we'll enhance it obviously through the app. But another key aspect of confidence building is community. And that's, again, something that's not as obvious perhaps as the other parts. Why? Because we tend to think of confidence as a very individual exercise. It's about us. We need to be confident. We are either not confident or we want to be confident. But we don't tend to necessarily see it as a group exercise. But that's very important. So really quickly, what I tend to see with particularly unconfident people is they tend to have other unconfident people in their circle. And in principle, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But what tends to happen is obviously the subconscious surfacing of insecurities of various kinds. That usually means certain not so healthy behaviors, but it also means that the actual attachment between people, the reason people are friends, is oftentimes at least partially influenced by compensating with each other for some certain insecurities. So take, for example, someone who perhaps has a magazine beauty, and the other person has perhaps not a magazine beauty. So the one person is perceivedly more popular, maybe gets attention, and the other person traditionally does not. I know it's a very superficial example, but the point here is the person that usually doesn't get any attention at all suddenly gets attention because they're in the context of somebody who does. The other person does get a lot of attention and can feel extra good because they're with somebody who they're better because they get more attention. Very superficial example, but my point being, neither of those people is confident, but both want to get something. It's more of a transactional reason. A partial reason or a full reason for the friendship is transactional. And the reason why that's bad is probably already obvious, is when friendships, not that friendships don't matter in the good times, they do, but obviously, particularly when you're going through a rough time, you want to call someone at 3 a.m, those are not going to be the people who pick up. Those will be the first people to abandon you because there was never any substance or not enough substance for that friendship. Because it wasn't because you both come together as whole people who want to make each other better, but because you want something from the other person, but that's not available when you're calling at 3 a.m. And the same principle applies to confident people. They tend to have a very, at least a very aware, maybe not to the maximum confident, but fairly confident people around them. And the relationship doesn't change. Good times, bad times, they'll have your back. There isn't that kind of, you're my friend because you make me, my insecurities, you can help me balance out my insecurities. No. I'm with you because I'm already a whole person, or I'm working on myself. But I'm just here because we share genuine interests and we have care for each other. And it's a very different dynamic. So I see too many times that people are very unconfident, are left on their own to their own vices in moments of particular need. So what I'm trying to say is community is really important. Knowing that other people struggle with confidence, but also really to take a very hard look at your own circle currently. And I've had conversations with people before who went through periods where they had to entirely change their circle because they realized they were the only ones calling them. And no one ever called them. And that's a really painful realization, but it's needed because that is going to be the prompt for you to build the circle that has your back and that where there's mutual care. And what we then enhance through the app is just giving people an ability to just share notes. What has helped you to build your confidence? And obviously, who is it best to do with than other people who are on that journey too?
Right.
And confidence can be really hard to publicly talk about. Hey, I'm struggling with confidence. Like I have all these sorts of bits of shame and worries. Like you don't do that on LinkedIn. You don't do that maybe even in your wider friend circle. You might do it with one person. But if you're in an anonymous community of people who are all going through a similar thing in different ways, there is that, ability to share, and it makes that whole journey a whole lot easier. And there will be resources that have helped someone that will benefit you. So that's the last part.
Excellent. So take a minute, since we're running close on time here, and just get centered and think, okay, so what have we talked about already that I might want to go back and highlight, or something that we haven't even touched on yet that you want to put in here for people so they get a little bit more of an incentive to check out Hopstair?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we haven't specifically touched on, but one thing I would say is that whenever I speak to people, and again, it depends how you define confidence and so on, what people's understanding of it is, but by and large, around 80% or more of people struggle with their confidence. So if you sit there and think, oh, I'm probably the only one, or everyone's so confident around me, the truth is it's very unlikely the case. You're very likely going to be one of very, very many people who are going through the same thing. And that's a really important piece of validation because, again, it can feel very isolating to even just admit to yourself that you want to do work on yourself. Maybe you are a people pleaser. Maybe you have terrible boundaries. These things can be very shameful and embarrassing to admit, but without that admission, there's no way forward.
Right.
Shame and pride will only hold you back in that growth. It is facing those quite difficult emotions sometimes, but I swear 10 out of 10, 12 out of 10, you're better off for it. And so I think that's the first key thing to note. I'd also say that don't go by looks and perceptions. Most people, particularly in certain cultural contexts in the world, are either born, raised, or just very crafty in terms of keeping up a mask of themselves.
Right.
So somebody who's very outspoken, very dominant, very loud, visible, has no correlation whatsoever with their confidence.
With confidence, right?
So don't be fooled by people's masks. Don't be fooled by people's whether it's a physical mask, makeup, or fake hair, or like whatever, or whether it's how they speak, how they articulate. Don't get fooled. Focus on yourself. Focus on checking in with yourself. How confident do I feel today? Why don't I feel fully confident? There was a student recently, and I think that's a really good daily prompt for anybody. I asked him at the end of the project that I did with that group, so what's your definition of confidence? How has that changed? And he said, confidence for me now is about how true to myself am I in any given moment. So for example, do I behave the way I would behave if no one was watching? Do I talk like I would talk like no one is watching? Do I go into the spaces I would want to go, as if no one was watching? And what he means with that is going back to the social setting. If that's where you want to be, you should go. There shouldn't lack of confidence means that you don't go because there's a reason, like, but it goes against what you actually wanted to do. If you wanted to share an opinion.
And lack of confidence would have me going to a place I don't really want to go to. But I think
true, exactly.
they're going to think badly of me if I don't. Yeah.
It goes both ways. Absolutely. So I think that's just really, and it holds the same with clothes. Like, do you really need to dress this way? Or is this really the absolute requirement at that event? Or can you just wear something that makes you feel good and that, suits you? Or are you holding back on your opinions? Are you, like, whatever it is that you feel like is not true to you, is a really good reminder on a daily basis to ask yourself. And again, think back about the onion, what you're doing about any of those things, the self-reflection, the introspection, the asking those whys, those comfort zoney things, changing up your routine. All these things help you peel back that onion. And that's a big onion. You know how many layers an onion has. You just need to chop one in half and you'll see how many layers there are. So this will take time. It's a process. But see it as an investment that you do every day, and a little thing you do every day. So all of these little points of reflection will help you peel that back. And then, in my view, it becomes less scary. And I would also say, don't focus on everything at once. So, for example, like you might say you have social anxiety. Maybe really that frightens you to bits. Maybe you could try it in small, but it may be too big of a mountain. It might be to the point of paralysis that it actually detracts you from trying to do something. Maybe try something else, or maybe do it on a much smaller scale. These changes, like you said earlier, the achievements, they don't have to be massive. The vast majority of these achievements are tiny. The progress you make on a daily basis. So focus on the stuff that feels doable right now. And you'll be absolutely fine.
And the website is simply Hopstair, HOPSTAIR.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we'll have the links in the notes for this. And as you mentioned, you're in the process of finishing a book.
Yes.
And the app is still being built. It's got other aspects that are coming out. So I encourage people to take a look at this. It's really good information about how you can build your own confidence. And that's one of the most useful tools any of us can have interacting in the world, and being able, as you said, to feel like I'm okay just being my genuine self. And that's one of the triggers for me knowing, is my confidence up or down?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, Nadine. It's a pleasure to meet you and hear about this work.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Very great questions. They had me thinking quite a bit, which I appreciate a lot. So,
well, thank you for your time, and I look forward to following the app.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.